I'm Paul Leary. The following interview is about the book Gray and Gay, A Journey of Self-Acceptance by Dr. John D. Siegfried. The book is available at Amazon as a softcover or for your Kindle. You can contact grayandgay at comcast.net. That's grayandgay at comcast.net. Even the New York Times labeled homosexuality as deviance, degeneracy, and perversion decades before the Stonewall riots of 1969, which spurred the gay rights movement. Many gay and lesbian people who came of age in that period moved to New York City or San Francisco, but untold tens of thousands followed the conventional route of marriage and family, suppressing their sexuality and conforming to community standards. Gray and Gay is the brutally honest account of a doctor's long and enduring struggle to accept his homosexuality and the later transition from the divorce of his 35-year marriage to his 20-year partnership with another man. In it, Dr. Siegfried crosses gender lines and lends insight to straights and gays alike. And Dr. John Siegfried joins me now for this interview.
Well, I'm so glad, John, that you took the time to talk to me today. So let's start with your story, your background as to what you do and what you've done for your career.
Currently, I'm retired and will probably stay retired. But I grew up in eastern Pennsylvania, in Allentown, Pennsylvania Dutch country. Went to college in Allentown, Muhlenberg College, and then went to the University of Pennsylvania Medical School. I finished medical school, went to Indiana University to do my internship, and then at that time, because this was, I came of age prior to Stonewall. This was in the 40s, 50s that I was going through the educational process. But it was also the time when young men were conscripted and had to go into the Army. I had deferments because I was taking medical education, but I had to pay the government back. So after my internship, I was in the United States Public Health Service, working on Indian reservations for a couple of years before I went back to Philadelphia area to train as a pediatrician. And I practiced pediatrics in suburban Philadelphia for 20-some years. But by the 70s, my kids, I had 3 at the time, were going to college, and I could not pay for 3 kids in college at one time. So I left my private practice, went to Saudi Arabia, worked for the Saudi Air Force in an Air Force hospital for 2 years as chief of pediatrics and then chief of the medical staff. Earned big bucks, enough to pay the kids, and came back to the States and did not go back into private practice. It was interesting because in my experience of being in Saudi, I had the opportunity to work in programs and developing programs for Saudi students and interns, and I enjoyed the program aspect, and I thought, I know I can do clinical pediatrics, and my partners wanted me back in the practice. But I wanted to try something else, so I ended up taking a position with McNeil Pharmaceutical, one of the Johnson & Johnson companies, and spent 10 years with Johnson & Johnson in what's called regulatory affairs. I was interacting with the Food and Drug Administration on issues of drug development and getting drugs approved and safety issues of drugs. And I retired from Johnson & Johnson with the thought that my wife and I would be retiring to the Caribbean. We had a place on the island of Nevis, St. Kitts and Nevis, our sister islands, and we had carefully researched this, decided that that's where we would spend our retirement. Instead, we divorced. And
so about what age are you?
Oh, at that point I was late 60s. Yeah. No, I'll take that back. I was 60 at that point, because then I came back to Washington and worked for another 10 years with the Pharmaceutical Trade Association, the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers in Washington. and then retired from pharmaceutical research and manufacturers. So I figured, 3 strikes, you're out, 3 retirements, it's time to call it quits. Mm-hmm. And I ended up in Fort Lauderdale, which is a wise choice, a good place to live.
So let's talk about the divorce and what prompted that. Well,
the divorce, I would dare say no divorce is unidimensional. The easiest thing for me to say is it was prompted by the fact that I was homosexual and my wife was heterosexual. But having said that, we were married for 35 years, and she had known that I was gay, although the term gay wasn't used when we came together in the 50s. But she knew that I was interested in men, and she thought that would, and I thought too that
she could change you.
Yeah, she could change me. In fact, when I came out to her a few weeks before our wedding, and told her that I had sexual interest in men, her response was, "Well, are you active?" Now, what she was really asking, I found out later, was, are you overtly homosexual, or are you sort of that I have feelings, but I haven't acted on them?
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting because now this is all in your book, Gay and Gray.
Yeah, it's Gray and Gay.
Gray and Gay. Because I didn't realize that she knew from before you were married.
Right.
And that you even knew yourself that you were gay.
Or
you knew you had feelings because the term wasn't used.
The term wasn't used, and I fought labeling myself as homosexual until I was well into my 30s. I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be a normal Eagle Scout, football player kind of kid. So I was not willing to admit that, although, retrospectively, heavens, I loved wrestling with boys in the backyard because I wanted to feel their body pressed against mine. I was 5 or 6 years old, but I didn't have a term for that. That's just a feeling.
But you were also aware.
I was aware. And I had, by the time I met my then fiancé, I had sexual experiences with men, and I loved it, enjoyed it. So in telling her that I had feelings for men and her asking whether this was, whether I had, her question was, her question really was, are you active? And I interpreted that to mean at that particular time I wasn't seeing anybody, I wasn't having sexual relationship with anybody, so I said, no, I wasn't active. She interpreted that to mean that I had never acted on my impulses, that they were hidden impulses, but not. And she was going to save me.
And so were you attracted to your wife?
Oh, yeah, very much so. She was a very beautiful woman and a very unique person. I have to say, retrospectively, I could not have been more fortunate in selecting a mate. She was intelligent, humorous, hardworking. She was a great gal.
So you wanted to get married?
I wanted a family.
You did? You wanted children?
Absolutely. I wanted kids. I wanted to have a family. And
so take us through getting married. She knows. You know.
She knows, I know, and I had told her that if we got married, if we went ahead with our marriage, because, see, I flew down to Atlanta a few weeks before where she was living, a few weeks before the wedding, essentially to try and back out of it.
And you felt obligated to tell her.
I felt she had to know the truth. And I really wanted, again, I know now that I was really trying to get out of the marriage.
You were trying to get out, yeah.
But her response was, ain't nothing can't be cured by putting you next to a real-life feminine dame, quoting from South Pacific and Rogers and Hammerstein and that philosophy, which was pretty accepted at that time. And that's what I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe that she could cure me or that marriage could cure me. But I said if we went ahead with the marriage, I wanted to go into therapy to deal with, quote, my problem. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's how I saw it. It was my problem and therapy was going to be the cure. Didn't work out that way. I did have therapy, extensive therapy and we had couples therapy at various times, but that was not something that was going to happen.
Did the therapist try to dissuade you from continuing the marriage, or?
No therapist ever tried to dissuade me from continuing the marriage. There was one therapist who, and understandably, who tried to lean on me to not have any male sexual relationships while we were working on this problem because they would distract from the work on the problem. But that's a little bit like Nancy Reagan saying, just say no to drugs. It's not a realistic approach, but that was one approach.
And how did it work out with monogamy in marriage?
Well, how did it work out? Not well. Because while we had sexual relationships that were successful and pleasurable, mutually pleasurable, most of the time I had to fantasize I was with a man in order to gain an erection and to have sex with a woman. And the other thing was that even though we had sex, it didn't fully satisfy me. I wanted to be with a man. Emotionally, that gave so much more to me. And I even rationalized that if I continued to see or to have sex with a man, one night stand here or there, that fulfilled me so that I could be a better lover for my wife. It's a wonderful rationalization.
That is an interesting rationalization.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm not the only man that chose that rationalization, but that's sort of where I came from. And but, sexually throughout the marriage, there were strains. And about 15, 20 years into the marriage, things just stopped. And we didn't have sex for years after that.
You stay married for 35 years.
35 years.
And then you just feel that it's time. You have how many children?
3 children. But what happened is that during the marriage, there were 3 occasions when I really fell for another guy and had an emotional as well as sexual experience that was very fulfilling. Mm-hmm. Each time that happened, my wife knew about it after the fact, caused tremendous strain on the relationship, obviously. But we stayed together because we both had a commitment to the kids and to each other. And I'm sure there were other reasons of not wanting to upset the apple cart. It had worked well. We had a pleasant life.
Did other family members know about this situation?
Not at that point. Not at that point.
You have any siblings yourself?
I had 2 sisters who were alive at the time. They did not know.
Your parents?
Parents were dead. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My uncle, who was still alive, knew, and his wife, Aunt Franny, so that I was out to them. But family, it's a small family to start with. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So no awkward Christmases or holidays. It was just sort of almost a picture perfect looking from the outside.
From the outside, it was picture perfect from the outside. We were very popular in our community. We had dinner parties, picnics in the picnic grove on our property, and everyone, when they left, I'm sure thought, "Oh, this is the perfect family, the perfect couple." That's the appearance that we developed.
And where did you end up living? I know you said you flew to Atlanta. Is that where you stayed?
No. My most of my married life was in suburban Philadelphia.
Oh, yes, that's right. You said you had your practice there. So take us through. You've got your children are grown, and you've been married 35 years, and it's time for the divorce.
Well, married 35 years, had a place in the Caribbean. My wife went down to the Caribbean to be in residence to help supervise renovations on the property. I'm in Washington on my, working for working for the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers, and I fell for a guy that I met at a gay bar, and we both recognized that this was just sort of a summer romance because I was going to the Caribbean, but it just didn't work out that way. I really came to the point of realizing that I had to make a decision. And what helped me make that decision, which I'm sure is a pretty unorthodox approach, but I spoke to the minister that was a very close friend of mine, that I had been in his congregation in Philadelphia, Germantown. And Ted asked me the question when I told him the story of how I'd met Howard, and he'd known for years that I was gay. He finally said, "John, if you could make a choice, would you choose," and you knew that your life had a finite endpoint coming, would you choose a year in the Caribbean with Sybil, my wife, or would you choose a week in Washington with Howard? And I said, "Thank you, Ted. That clarifies it."
Absolutely.
Yeah, because
put it all into perspective.
Because it was the difference of being in that which was pleasant, conventional, as opposed to that which had real passion and meant something. So it was on that basis then that I asked for a divorce.
So how did your wife take the news?
She was devastated. Yeah, not that I was gay or that I was involved
because
with somebody. She'd been through that before, but that we would separate and divorce. But her response when I asked her for a divorce was, "Then let's do it quickly and do it fairly."
But she knew you had romances throughout the marriage over the years.
Yes.
How was she made aware of that? Did you talk about it with her?
The first time this happened, I told her, because I couldn't keep it quiet.
Mm-hmm.
It was too important to me. The second time, she sensed it. Mm-hmm. Crazy situation. I had fallen for a guy who was a businessman in suburban Philadelphia and lived close to where we lived. And I thought, this is great because we can get together. And I tried to bring he and his wife into our home in a social situation, dinner party situation.
He was married as well.
He was married as well. Had several children. And I thought the evening had gone beautifully. I was very pleased. We all got along well together. 6:30 in the morning on a Monday morning, after the dinner party, I woke up. My wife was already awake, and she immediately said, "You're in love with that man, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." Well, that created tremendous furor, as you could imagine. Almost split at that point, but did not. And then the third time this happened was with my current partner, and she didn't know about it until I told her about it, but she was very suspicious.
You've talked about people that, in my mind, seem to be very accepting of this, and I say that that I'm surprised to hear that, because we're talking about a time a few decades ago, I guess, or a couple of decades ago now. But it seems like the pastor you spoke with and maybe even some family members seemed to be okay that you were homosexual.
Well, yeah, that's true. I can't.
Or accepting.
They were accepting, and actually, the community, the friends we had, as a married couple, were very accepting people. These were not. I don't want to use the pejorative of redneck, but these were not. These were not fanatics in terms of sex or anything else. In fact, there were friends among our friends who turned out to be lesbian or gay. I was introduced to several gay men through my wife. Whether she knew they were gay or not, I don't know. And at one point, the only man she said she had considered marrying other than myself, who became a minister in the Presbyterian Church, turned out to be gay as well. So whether there was a sense... Well, it's interesting, but I think it's not unusual in the sense that there are many women who see within gay men an acceptance, or the macho man is not what every woman wants. Sometimes a woman wants a man who is more accepting, more sensitive, more concerned about her well-being, and they find that in a gay guy.
Right.
They don't find that in the fullback.
Was it an open marriage? Did she have other relations?
The concept of an open marriage never even crossed our minds. It just didn't.
Well, you mentioned that you had dinner with the other man and his wife,
right?
But it wasn't that kind of a deal.
No.
And,
in fact, when we had that dinner, my friend Don was not out to his wife either. She didn't know he was gay. Within a few weeks following this, he came out to his wife. And Sybil, my wife, could have been a support to her and help her work through some of this. That was too challenging for her at the time. She didn't want to do that. So it was not a sexual menage a trois, whatever.
Or what have you. But as far as you know, during your marriage, your wife did not have any outside relationships.
I know now that that's not quite true, that there was one person, a friend, a mutual friend.
She probably was looking for what she wasn't getting from you at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I recognize that, and it was perfectly, that didn't give me a problem. I had been cheating. There's no reason she shouldn't. But
was that ever discussed?
No.
No.
See, that's why you said what led to the divorce. The easy answer is I'm gay.
Right.
The more underlying answer is we really didn't communicate well, particularly on personal issues. We kept anything that might be confrontational out of the picture so we didn't have to confront it.
Okay, so you fall in love with a couple of guys, and then your third guy was the current relationship you're in?
It was a one-night stand, but we're still standing, and that's been 22 years.
22 years.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask also about your children, though, at the time of the announcement of the divorce. They're grown at this point. How did they take the news?
Of the divorce?
Let's start with the divorce. Did they know you were gay before the divorce?
I came out to my kids when they were late teens. And
interesting.
My wife and I had discussed this. She knew I wanted to come out to the kids because I was becoming more active. There was a gay physicians group that I helped start in the Philadelphia area. I had attempted to get some gays organized within the Academy of Pediatrics, which I was a member of. And I didn't want this information to come to my kids secondhand.
What was their reaction?
Well, this was fascinating, really, Paul, because it happened to be that June Sunday that Father's Day and Gay Pride Day were simultaneous. And we were having breakfast, and I had this little speech, that I was going to give the kids. And I told them, I said, I've always supported minority causes, but basically that's because I'm part of a minority. And my oldest son, David, who was probably 17 at the time, immediately said, yeah, Dad, I know. You'd rather be down at Belmont Plaza at the Gay Pride Day parade today.
He knew.
He says,
he suspected.
Well, we've talked about this since, and he said, no, he said, that was out of the blue. He said it was the furthest thing from my mind. I believe that, yes, there had to be some sense, some premonition, because you wouldn't pick that out of the blue. But I simply said, yeah, Dave, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. And so it was a very tearful and emotional time.
And how old were the other two kids?
Kathy was 18 and Steve was 16.
Okay. What was your daughter's reaction?
My daughter was not surprised because she had mentioned she was dating a guy and they'd gone to a gay dance bar in Philadelphia. And when she mentioned the name of it, I recognized it. I knew it. I wasn't, surprised to hear about it. So she had her suspicions. Stephen, my youngest, he had no idea at all. Just totally out of the blue.
Did he take it okay?
Oh, yeah. They took it okay. The thing I've never, and we've not discussed this, life continued as normal. And, their friends still came to the house, etc. We didn't talk about it. But I don't know how it influenced their reactions with their compatriots, with their peers, whether they felt they had to share it, whether they felt they had to hide it, what kind of pressures this put on them, because, there's the well-recognized saying that when I come out of the closet, my parents go in, that there's this response or this reciprocity. So I don't know whether they experienced any of that or not.
Did any of your children turn out to be gay?
No. I know that they have had some gay experiences.
Like most people do, I suppose.
My daughter for a while toyed with being a lesbian, but it didn't work for her. And I know one of my sons has had some gay experiences, but is in a very happy marriage.
Would you ever suspect that your son could be doing the same thing you did with the marriage? Or it was just an experiment or a couple of times?
My sense is it was an experiment. And I haven't picked up anything that would indicate that. And one of my sons who has had some extramarital experience, it hasn't been with a man. Yeah.
Well, let's get back to the current relationship. The reason, I suppose, you said for the divorce, your relationship of 22 years.
Right.
How did you meet this gentleman?
When I was living in Washington, and there still is a group called the Gay Married Men's Association, GAMA.
The Gay Married Men's Association.
Yeah, Gay Married Men's Association, GMMA. And they have chapters in Philadelphia and New York and various places. But when I was able to, I went to the GAMA meetings on a Friday evening. They met, I think, every other week. After the meeting, they would retire to a gay bar that was fairly close to the church where they were holding their meeting. I never went with them, over a period of several years that I went to some meetings. And I never went with them, and I'm sure it was because at some level I was afraid that I might find something there. I still wanted to stay in the marriage. I was trying to stay in the marriage. And I was afraid I might find something else. But one evening they leaned on me a bit, and I went with them. And to my amazement, I had a very good time. It was a piano bar called Friends in Washington, very popular. Everybody sat around or stood around singing, the Rodgers and Hammerstein, South Pacific, Oklahoma stuff.
All the great show tunes, all the great music.
The stuff that gay men love to sing. But what also amazed me was that this was in essentially a brownstone on P Street in Washington, big bay window, and I had a good time, to my surprise, because I didn't particularly enjoy gay bars. My earlier experience of gay bars were that they were dark and people stood around and didn't talk to you, and so this was a pleasant experience. And the following evening, Saturday night, I went back on my own, knowing that it would be different. I wouldn't be with a support group of friends.
Okay.
But that was how I met my partner. He was at the bar that evening. I was leaning on the cigarette machine in the back of the bar, and he came to get a pack of cigarettes, and we started a little bit of repartee, and then later, not too long after that, he came back. His friends were leaving to go to another bar. Did I want to go with them? I declined that invitation.
But there was an initial instant interest.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There was an initial interest. He and his friends went off to the other bar, and within a minute or so, he came back and said, "I'd rather be here with you."
Wow. Which
was tremendously affirming, and I was physically attracted to him.
Is there much of an age difference?
21 years.
21-year age difference.
He still holds it against me that when he asked my age, I told him I was 60, when in fact I was really 61. Now, why I would lie about 1 year, I have no idea. But
believe me, I know. Even 1 year is hard to admit sometimes.
It seemed important at the time.
Well, you've said that this was a one-night stand that's lasted 22 years. How have you made it last 22 years?
Well, I think you make it last 22 years like any other couple makes it last 22 years, gay or straight. It takes a lot of compromise. It takes a lot of learning. Howard's taught me all sorts of stuff. I'm sure he's learned some things from me too, but basically you have to be willing to compromise, and that's bottom line.
How's your relationship with your ex-wife today and your children?
My relationship with the kids is great. I was with my youngest son last weekend, who's recently moved to Florida, and I'm going up to Washington in a few weeks on business, and I'll see my son up in Winchester, Virginia. So we're in close contact. My wife, after we divorced, she wanted to stay on the island of Nevis and run our little retirement home as a bed and breakfast, which she did for 10 years. And then she died of pancreatic cancer about 5 years ago.
Oh, I see. Yeah. She's passed on.
Yeah.
Was she a part of your life with your male partner?
To a limited extent. And this was interesting, Paul, because in the divorce and immediately after period, while we were still living in Washington, she had surgery on one occasion and came to our home afterward for a few days of recuperation.
Interesting.
And when she was in the islands, every time she came back to the States, we'd have lunch or dinner together, partly to go over business, legal stuff that we had.
Your life had some entanglements, of course, because of being 35 years together.
There
and
were still financial issues that we had to deal with. But then, I'd say 5 or 6 years into the divorce, that ceased. She didn't communicate with me any longer, and letters and calls that I had placed weren't returned, and I got the message that she didn't want to be in contact.
Did she remarry or have other men?
She had other men that she saw in her divorce period or post-divorce. She didn't marry. She chose not to. She had opportunities.
It interests me when you talk about those decades, so many decades ago, when things were different, and it almost seems, to hear your story, and everybody's story is different, but to hear your story, it almost seems like things today seem a little more intense when it comes to gay rights and gay relationships and things. And I say that meaning you had a support group around you. You had what it seems to be a very understanding wife and family members and children, which really isn't the case in a lot of stories we hear. Do you get my meaning?
Yeah, I get your meaning, and I don't know whether that's...
I guess I'm saying you were blessed in a certain way as well.
Absolutely, I'm blessed. I've been blessed all along. So I don't know whether it's a matter of a difference in the times. I'm more inclined to think it's just a difference in terms of the people and how you relate to each other. I don't know that I can define that very well, but number one, when I was going through a lot of this, gay rights were not even heard of. The concept of gay marriage a favorite illustration. In my teens and 20s, I read the New York Times book reviews, fervently, looking for bits and pieces of information that might indicate something about homosexuality. This was a time when even the New York Times would not talk about homosexuality. Right. Andre Gide, a French writer who was out and gay, he was a deviant, a pervert. And this was true of their definition of Truman Capote and others. So my concept was that homosexuality was perversion, deviance, you're going to go to hell kind of thing.
Right.
And it just took a long time of experience and education to move through that and to recognize that that's not the case, that this is who I am and the way I was made.
Would you marry your partner, your male partner in New York, let's say, where gay marriage is now legal? Would you do that? Or if it became legal here in Florida?
If it became legal here in Florida, my objection personally is that I don't want to be married in terms of it's legal here, but it's not legal there. If it were legal in Florida, we have a domestic partnership. If it's legal in Florida, I would go ahead with that.
But not New York.
No, I'm not going to go to New York or Massachusetts to get a marriage license or to get a marriage that state endorses, but it means nothing to me when I leave the state.
Do you think, though, that is sort of this is the beginning of trying to get it legalized nationwide?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it will be.
Yeah.
It may not be in my lifetime, but I have no question that day is coming.
What was the reason that you wanted to write the book?
I don't know. It was an evolution more than a creation. I've always enjoyed writing. In retirement, I've been part of writing groups just to improve my writing skills. For the last 10 years, I've written, regularly contributed a column to a periodical up in Delaware, and I have a column called Gray and Gay. And so I came to Florida in retirement, and I signed up for some writing classes, etc. And mostly I was writing short stories or experiential kinds of personal experiences. And one of the women who was running one of those groups said, John, you ought to consider pulling these together into a memoir at some point. Yeah, fine. I didn't think about it, But then the more I was accumulating it, the more I thought, I really would like to do that. And as much for my kids as anything. I mentioned in the introduction to the book that I started this as sort of a family history of where we grew up, where I grew up, the Siegfried family. But it quickly became apparent that the story I was really trying to tell was my own coming to grips with who I was. And after a long period of rejecting that, finally coming through to the fact that, hey, it's okay, you're a gay man and you're a competent person and you don't have to hold your head down for anybody. So it evolved. It wasn't sort of a decision, I'm going to write a book. And even up until a year or so ago, I didn't know whether I'd ever publish it. I gave the manuscript that I had completed to each of my kids and asked for their comments. Was it factually correct? Was there anything in here that they felt that they would be upset about if it were in the public venue? And they all supported me going ahead with it, and so I did. But I would have to say that the real motivation for writing it is wanting my children to be able to know their father in a more complete context.
Would you give, or what advice would you give somebody that might be in a situation today, meaning going to get married, wanting that family? Would you give them some advice based on what you went through?
Well, yes. Fortunately, there are options now for men or women, lesbians, gays, to have family without getting married, or at least without a heterosexual component to marriage. There's adoption and other avenues whereby you can have children. So that if a family is important, and I hope it's important to lots of gays and lesbians, because family is the most important thing to me. It binds you together. So, there's that. But I guess the one thing that I would tell any couple is you have to be honest with each other. Just, this business of, well, I can't tell him that, he'll be too upset. You have to move through that, and you have to risk the upset and all that, because if you don't have an honest relationship, you don't have anything.
Have your children and your partner read the book?
Oh, yeah.
They've all read it.
I don't think my partner has, interestingly. Howard, and I say that he may have read bits and pieces of it as I had it around the desk. Mm-hmm. But he's not read it in toto, to my knowledge.
Why do you think that is?
You'd have to know Howard.
Okay.
I don't have a specific reason, but I'm also not surprised, and it's not, I don't take it as a personal affront either of my writing style or anything else. It's just that.
Well, I was thinking maybe because it had to do with, time before him or the wife, or was there any?
Well, it may be that, but it also, it has to do with my time with him, and there have been rocky episodes with that. One of the things one of the conclusions I came to, I thought getting a male partner would solve everything. It doesn't solve everything at all. Changing genitalia doesn't make a hell of a lot of difference about how you see the world and how you interact with people. So we've had our ups and downs too.
Yeah.
And he may not want to read that. I don't know. But although I know he knows what's in there. And
your children with Howard, your current partner, relationship there is
good.
Is good. You spend holidays together, all of you?
We haven't done that because of distance, etc. We've spent holidays with parts of it, but we never all three kids and their families and John and Howard. That's never happened.
You mean they haven't come up with the excuse they want to visit you in December in Florida?
No, they haven't.
Like my family?
They haven't. Well, my daughter is in Florida. She's up in Orlando, and I see her. Right. I'm either up or she's down from time to time. My youngest son has just moved to the Palm Beach area, and I was with him last weekend, and Howard and I have been with him a number of times, meet them for dinner or something. The one in Winchester is more difficult because that's, Winchester, Virginia, of the distance.
Yeah. What's your proudest moment in this book, if you have one?
Oh, my proudest moment in the book. That's a good question.
How about a proudest moment in your life?
When I was still working with Johnson & Johnson, I could tell you awards that I've won stuff, but that's, But I was working with J&J, and it was a time in which they were focusing on diversity in the workplace and improving working relationships between blacks and whites, old and young, Asians, etc. So they were doing a number of diversity workshop kinds of things. And I was in a diversity workshop, which at that time was a 2.5-day off-site meeting. And in that meeting, toward the end of it, I came out to the group as gay, unintentionally, but I came out to the group as gay, and realized after I'd done it, oh my God, the woman over here holding my hand reports to me, the vice president of so-and-so is across the room. But because I had done that, I felt I had to get that information to my boss. Everything in this seminar was supposedly confidential, but I thought, news like this will travel fast. And I called my boss, George Oye, and I said, George, I got to see you as soon as we can get. Well, he was going to be in Washington. I said, fine, I'll meet you. Where are you? So I went down on a Monday morning, met him at the Mayflower Hotel where he was in a business meeting. And I told him the fact that of the weekend and the fact that I had come out to the group as being a gay man. And his response, he didn't know I was gay, but his response was, oh, thank God. And I'm sort of like, what? He said, I thought you were coming to tell me you were retiring. And it was sort of such a tremendous affirmation that I'm concerned that I'm going to share with him that which could be destructive professionally. And his only worry was, I thought you were going to tell me you were retiring.
That's pretty funny. You really have lucked out with a lot of people in life.
I have, absolutely. Now, Paul,
because we hear so many other stories of the opposite being true.
I am one of the most fortunate people in the world, because I have supportive family, friends. It's hard to beat that.
Do you think it's a good idea for people to read your book who might be either in similar situations or, that just would like to see another point of view or of what can happen in life?
Maybe I'm biased, but I would say I think it's good for anyone to read my book.
I thought you were going to say bisexual for a moment.
No.
Did that ever cross your mind, bisexuality?
No. At one point, some years ago, knowing my experience, I thought, I really ought to write a book titled, I've looked at both life from both sides now, borrowing from the song tune. And then I realized I really couldn't write that book because I haven't looked at life from both sides. I've looked at life as a gay man who has been in a traditional marriage, but that doesn't give me the insight of a heterosexual man in that situation. So I can't say that. I've never thought about bisexuality. But
was that the only woman in your life?
Yes.
Interesting.
But going back to, what I would say about the book is I really think there's a lot in there for anybody to get something out of in terms of my experience and transpose it to their own, or if nothing else, to fight against it and say that he is so full of crap, I just can't buy any of that. But that's okay as long as you're challenged and think about the issues, because it's really not about being, in a sense, about being gay or gray, either one. It's about relationships and about how you treat people and interact with people, and above all, your ability to be honest with yourself and with others.
And I like that title.
Gray and Gay?
Yeah, Gray and Gay. It's a good title.
It's who I am. I can prove it. Well, at least here's the gay part. The gray part. The gay part I'll have to prove some other way.
That'll be on the website. Well, John Siegfried, this has been a wonderful conversation, and thanks for sharing it with me.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. I really do.
Thank you.